Hello, everyone, and welcome to Educated STEM. I'm Kate, the founder of Educated STEM, and today we are going to continue the series that we've already had up. You've seen videos with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Mahadeo Sukhai, before, talking about his experience, and now we're actually moving into his area of absolute expertise, which is DEI. So he's going to answer a number of my very naive questions for me, and hopefully we are going to learn a lot. So, without further ado, my first question for Mahadeo is, what is DEI?
Kate, thank you very much for having me again. And I think I'm going to start the answer to this question in a couple of different ways. I think it's important to know what it is, but I also think it's important to know what it is not. So DEI, I don't necessarily use the acronym in quite that way, but we can come back to that later if you want. DEI is an acronym. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are what the D, the E, and the I stand for. In effect, what it is intended to be is a set of practices to ensure fair and equitable participation of all persons, irrespective of background, irrespective of lived experience, irrespective of socioeconomic status or where they come from in the world, or what language they speak at home, or any number of identities. So fair and equitable participation irrespective of one's identities in the context of, say, school or work or engagement in the social setting. So let's say you're getting services at a municipal office, right? Or in healthcare, right? So the idea behind DEI is that the principles that are embedded within what DEI is are principles that are applicable irrespective of the setting, and ensure that everyone has the opportunity to succeed at doing the thing that they're supposed to do in the place that they're at, right? What DEI is not. So it's not reverse discrimination. It's not the marginalization of any group in favor of any other group. It is not. It's not lowering of standards. It's not. It's not kind of oppression of the dominant group. It's not. It's not affirmative action. It's not intended to be those things. The principle behind what DEI is and what DEI stands for is that the opportunity to participate in whatever it is that we are talking about, whether it's school or work or healthcare or social settings or what have you, the opportunity to participate in any of those settings ought to be, should be, pick your term, a human right. And for it to be a human right, that means that everyone's got to be able to engage with that and achieve an outcome when doing so, and preferably achieve the intended outcome when doing so. And so that's the fundamental framework that DEI sits within. It is, I think, often misunderstood, and has perhaps been applied in any number of ways that have caused some interesting controversy over the years. But at its core, it's about making sure that we all have the chance to do the thing that we want to do in the space that we want to do it in.
And I've seen DEI written differently with the letters in a different order. I'm thinking of my British colleagues, and I cannot remember what order they put it in, but it isn't DEI. So why is that?
So diversity, equity, inclusion, some people will include A for accessibility. I will include A for accessibility because I don't think A fits in with the D, the E, or the I. Some people will include S for social justice. Some people will drop the social, and then it's J, right, for just. Some people will include an extra I for indigeneity. Some people will include an R for, or an AR for anti-racism. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. I've seen some people include B for belonging. Some people include L for leadership. So then we turn things into really cute words, right? So if you want to think about DEI plus justice, you can turn it into Jedi, because who doesn't love a good Star Wars movie? I'm a Star Trek fan, so I don't love a good Star Wars movie, but that's beside the point. Move along.
You can like both.
I could like both, but I tolerate one and love the other one. But anyway, so people can do that. I've seen ideal, inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, leadership, because ideal is a nice word. I've seen DEI-B, where you're including belonging, right? Now, here's my fundamental philosophy on the subject. Which letter you put first, because humans like to prioritize things. And so which letter you put first is where you're going to place your emphasis, right? So think about it in this context. Diversity is fundamentally a counting term, right? And so diversity is about who is at the table and what backgrounds and lived experiences are coming to the table, right? Diversity by itself is also a little bit of a contextual or context dependent term. So you can have some groups that are more diverse than other groups, right? So diversity is all about who is at the table, and it's all about counting who is there, right? Equity is sort of the notion that everyone has the same opportunity to succeed within the space, and that has to do with addressing or acknowledging historical imbalances and historical injustices, and then acknowledging those and correcting for them in setting a system up through policy and practice. So equity is very much about is very much about this notion of again, it's an opportunity to succeed at doing something, right? Inclusion is ensuring that opportunity to succeed actually manifests in something that actually has a purpose. So the idea behind inclusion is not only does everyone have equal opportunity to succeed, but everyone is then taking full advantage of that equal opportunity to succeed, to be able to participate within whatever it is that they're trying to participate within, again, whether that's school or work or social settings or healthcare or what have you, right? So if you come back to what I originally said, which is humans like to prioritize things, right? So we prioritize things that have no priority assigned to them, simply because something has to come first. And so in our minds, we're like, okay, so the D comes first, so let's then say that the D takes priority over the E and the I. And the argument basically goes something like this: if you don't ensure a diverse space, the space can't be equitable or inclusive. Except the pushback on that is you can actually have diverse spaces that are neither equitable nor inclusive, right? In Canada, they put the E first, so it's EDI, right? And so equity is first, diversity is second, and inclusion is third. So the notion being that if you again set up your policies and practices to be quote unquote fair, right, and to recognize and correct the injustices or imbalances of the past, then you are going to create a diverse space. And in doing that, you've created an inclusive space. So EDI, right? But if inclusion is the point of all of this, then why not actually just acknowledge that the end goal is inclusion? And let's put that first. And so we come to the term that I tend to prefer using, which is IDEA, which is inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And so then in the context of inclusion, again, it isn't just about creating a framework. It's about ensuring that framework is applied to maximum effect, so that everybody has the opportunity to participate, everyone has the opportunity to belong, everyone has the opportunity to succeed, and you get there, you see sort of that maximum effect of what you've done with the E in the I. So you can set up a policy framework, but if that policy framework isn't implemented or enforced effectively, then you're never going to have an inclusive space, right? And so from my perspective, there are lots of different ways of using the term, and very honestly, I think we are all going to put our emphasis where we want our emphasis to go, right? And sometimes I think it comes down to how you measure things within the idea space, right? I'm gonna subvert this and use idea going forward now, since I've introduced it in this conversation. So it's easy to measure diversity, Kate, right? You measure diversity by counting who's at the table, right? Very easy to measure it. And so I've seen many organizations use measures of diversity as proxies for the other two things, right? But they're not the same thing. Diversity is not the same as equity. Equity is not the same as inclusion. And so how you measure diversity is not how you measure equity. How you measure equity is not how you measure inclusion, right? If you have created something that you will say to me, let's say you're in charge of an organization, I'm one of your staff, and if you've created within that organization a policy and practice framework where everyone is exposed to anti-bias training, for example, and where everyone has the opportunity to participate in whistleblower approaches if somebody, you know, is harassing them physically or verbally or emotionally or mentally, or you've got microaggressions in the workplace and I have the opportunity to report those in. Like you've got this wonderful framework, but if that wonderful framework doesn't get used, it's not inclusive. So you can measure the framework, but that doesn't actually mean that you've measured inclusion. It just means you've measured the framework, right? And so if you want to measure inclusion, then what you're really measuring is you're measuring from the participants within that space. Do they engage in the things that you want them to engage in, to equal measure across the board? Do you find that those policies that you are so proud of in organizations, are they doing the things that you want them to do, right? And so take the notion of, say, a whistleblower mechanism, right? A confidential and anonymous complaints mechanism. You could argue that the confidential and anonymous complaints mechanism isn't going to get used. Therefore, its usage count is at 0. Therefore, that's a very good thing because the space must be inclusive because you set it up to receive complaints. And because it's confidential and anonymous, then anyone who doesn't feel safe to have an in-person conversation can flag a complaint this way. Because you're receiving no complaints, there must be no issues. But that ends up being, I think, a bit of a logical fallacy, because depending on the size of the organization, if somebody says, well, yes, I could use this confidential and anonymous complaint system, but it will come back that it's me, and it will come back to my team, and it will come back to my manager, and I will get reprisals from having complained about something. So therefore, I'm not going to complain about something. Right. And I'll be very honest. I used to run an ombudsperson's office as a chief accessibility officer. And what became very, very evident in the running of that office was that people would talk to us if we created a safe space, but they would not use the confidential and anonymous complaints mechanism. Right. And so we were often in a position of receiving cases, and then we would go to HR and say, somebody came to us with this particular issue, can we work together on it? And they would say, well, this issue can't be real because nobody filed a complaint using our complaints mechanism. And I had to explain over and over and over again that no, people aren't going to use your confidential and anonymous complaints mechanism because they don't trust that it will stay confidential nor anonymous. And therefore, what they're really afraid of is a reprisal from their manager or from their colleagues. And those are the people they might be complaining about. right? So when we measure diversity or equity or inclusion, we really are measuring different things, and so these are different concepts, and it matters which one we put first, because from the perspective of how humans think about these things, we tend to think about things, even if they're not given priority, we tend to think about them in terms of the order of priority. The other thing I would say in answer to this question is, why do I include the A? And I've seen folks in the US go DEIA. I've seen others in Canada go EDIA. I do like the idea of idea, not only because it makes a nice word, but also because, again, it says two very important things. The first thing that it says is inclusion is the point. And the second thing that it says is that you can't actually do the inclusion, you can't have the diversity, and you can't be equitable unless you actually pay attention to accessibility. And I want to, maybe not in this video, maybe in the next one, I want to actually talk about how the word accessibility can often get misconstrued within this space, right, by people who don't know. But I also want to talk about the barriers to making sure that again, idea is actually applied correctly, because there's so many ways to do it where it becomes quite evident that maybe it can be misunderstood, right? Particularly in STEM. There are so many ways to do idea in STEM and so many ways to think about this, but it's really, really, really easy to misunderstand the whole process.
Okay, so are we going to call it idea from going forward?
Yes, please.
Okay, we can do that. I think that's a good point to leave, because the next question is a bit of a whopper. So let's finish this video here. The next time you see Mahadeo, he will be answering the question, what does a university or institution have to do legally for accommodations? And does that change depending on your country? So tune in for that. Thank you, Mahadeo, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Go and find Mahadeo's over at Idea STEM. The link is below. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.